Hi everyone! Today I'm going to introduce you to Ophrys apifera, more commonly known as the bee orchid. It's a tuberous perennial orchid and it's in the family Orchidaceae. Bee orchids have several small flowers. The flowers are about 2.5 centimeters wide, pale green, brown, and pink in color with yellow bee-like markings. Technically speaking, each flower has 3 large pink petal-like outer tepals, which you can see here, and over here. They also have a labellum, which is this middle section here, which is essentially a modified inner tepal, and this is the part that resembles a bee. And they also have 2 inner tepals, here and here, which are thought to resemble antennae. You can see bee orchids from spring to summer, and they measure approximately 30 centimeters in height. Geographically, they are native to Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. Bee orchids are found in pastures, field borders, banks, and in small groups of trees on chalk or limestone. They are especially common on recently disturbed soils. Their seeds are produced in the thousands, so they can blow several kilometers and can appear unexpectedly, especially in exposed ground, such as on road cuttings, quarries, and other industrial sites, especially if they have chalk or limestone soil. The largest distribution limit to this species is climatic conditions, because they can self-pollinate when bees are not around. Ophrys apifera is the only species in the genus Ophrys which preferentially practices self-pollination. The flowers are almost exclusively self-pollinating, especially in the northern ranges of the plant's distribution. In 2020, a group of researchers found that bee orchids have been able to extend their range further north because of global warming. Up until the end of the 20th century, the species was limited to the sub-Atlantic and sub-Mediterranean areas of Europe. However, over the past 20 years, its range has shifted to the northeast, and new populations were recorded in southern Scotland, Denmark, central and northeastern Germany, southern Sweden, and southern Poland. In all of these locations, populations of bee orchids were able to not only survive, but the populations were able to grow. Before I get into some of the plant's uses, here's some quick history about the plant's name. The name Ophrys derives from the Greek word ophrys, meaning eyebrow. It's believed that women in ancient Rome used to darken their eyebrows with the orchid, thus giving it its name. It also used to be called the humblebee orchid, with humble being an older variation of bumble, like bumblebee. When it comes to humans eating the plant, the root can be cooked and is a great source of salep, which is a fine white yellowish powder. It's very nutritious and can be added into cereals and used in bread. However, most popularly, it's used to make drinks. Salep is a very popular hot drink in Turkey and throughout the Middle East, and as the name implies, it's made of course with salep, as well as milk, sugar, and some cinnamon. Although the taste is very different, culturally you can think of it kind of like hot cocoa being made with cocoa powder and milk here. It is also commonly used in Turkish ice cream, or dondurma, which has a high resistance to melting and an almost stretchy consistency due to the inclusion of the salep. You can see some of that stretchiness going on in this photo here. When it comes to medical uses, salep helps to relieve inflammation and irritation. People will boil it with water and give it to children and those who are ill or healing from surgery. Bee orchids might have several more medical uses in the future, however. A 2020 study analyzing the biochemical compounds in Ophrys apifera found that the plant could be important in many medical applications due to its richness in secondary metabolic components. They confirmed its properties as an anti-inflammatory and suggested the plant's compounds could be used in anti-inflammatory drugs, as well as antibiotics, anticoagulants, and cholesterol-lowering drugs. Their analysis also stated that based on their preliminary research, the plant could be a good candidate for further studies, looking into its anti-inflammatory, antibacterial, antimicrobial, and anti-cancer properties. Outside of human uses, bee orchids are incredibly fascinating due to their complex mimicry. The flower mimics a bee, and in my opinion, is pretty convincing. This orchid specifically mimics the female Echara longicornis, commonly known as the longhorn bees. As you can probably guess, they get their name from their super long antennae. Now, the flower, of course, is not an exact replica of the bee, but from a distance, they do look quite similar. You can see a little comparison bee here and our flowers over here. Bee orchids are not unique in this, as many orchid flowers will resemble other animals. Here you can see the fly orchid on the left, which resembles a fly, the mirror orchis, which resembles a female wasp in the middle, and a really interesting case of an orchid resembling a bird in flight all the way on the right. Bee orchids do not just rely on their good looks, however. They also use pheromones to initially attract male bees. Orchids across Europe, Africa, South America, and Australia will emit pheromones that are similar to the sex pheromones secreted by female bees and wasps. It's believed that the development of these pheromones and visual mimicry resulted through coevolution, and that the flower evolved to secrete specific pheromones and mimic specific physical traits in parallel with insect evolution. In the same way, different orchids have different sets of physical features specific to the insects that pollinate them, they also each will emit different pheromones. Due to the combination of pheromones and copycat flowers, male bees will mistake bee orchid flowers for female bees and try to mate with them, but end up just getting covered in pollen instead. This process is referred to as pseudocopulation. In orchids, pseudocopulation is achieved primarily through the secreted pheromones and modify the velum. For bee orchids, this was that brown and yellow part of the flower that looks like a bee. Males are first attracted to the area by the secreted pheromones, then they mistake the labellum for a female, land on it, and try to mate. The bee dislodges the pollinia, which is the mass of pollen grains that sticks together from the orchid. The pollen then sticks to the bee's body or antennae, and is then transferred when the bee moves to the next orchid flower. Unfortunately, I couldn't find an example with bee orchids, but I did find a great video with an orchid that mimics a wasp to show you how pseudocopulation works.
As the male wasp nuzzles forward in his attempt to mate, he butts the pollinia which stick to him like yellow horns. He seems to be well aware that something has happened to him, but there's nothing he can do about it, and he flies off to try his luck elsewhere. Which, of course, is what the orchid requires, because this time he deposits the pollen on another bogus female.
I would just like to remind you that many bee orchid populations will self-pollinate because there aren't native bees to pollinate them. However, in areas where longhorn bees are present, this process will take place. Lastly, I want to touch on the super cool relationship bee orchids have with fungus. It turns out bee orchid seeds are quite simplistic. They're basically just an embryo surrounded by a single layer of protective cells. The seed contains very little food reserves and therefore depends on a symbiotic relationship with a species of soil-dwelling fungus called Orchid mycorrhizae. This relationship is especially important during seed germination, but continues in later stages of the plant's life as well. During germination, the fungal hyphae, which are the branching filaments of the fungus, invade the seed and enter the cells of the embryo. The seed combined with the fungus is called a protocorm, and you can see one on the left. The orchid then begins to digest the fungal tissue, which acts as a food supply for the plant, until it's able to obtain nutrients from the decaying material in the soil. Later on, Orchid mycorrhizae, which is the fungus, penetrates the orchid's plant's root cells and will form intricate coiled structures called pelotons. You can see an example on the right. At this stage, the fungus supplies carbon to the orchid during the early stages of growth. Many adult orchids continue to retain their fungal symbionts for the rest of their lives, but scientists are still investigating the benefits to the adult photosynthetic orchid as well as to the fungus. I appreciate you all taking the time to learn a bit about bee orchids with me. I'll leave you with this cute comic that you can hopefully find the humor in now that you are all bee orchid experts. If you have any questions, please let me know, and thank you so much for watching.